On the evening of June 21, 2025, a simple, stark message appeared on President Donald Trump's Truth Social account. It announced a very successful attack on Iran. The words just hung in the digital air, instantly sparking a global firestorm of speculation and alarm. The president confirmed that the United States military had conducted a major operation against key Iranian nuclear facilities. He assured the public that all American planes had returned safely to their bases. It was a declaration that signaled a dramatic and dangerous escalation, a direct American entry into a conflict that had been simmering between Israel and Iran for weeks. For days, the world had watched the Middle East with bated breath. The initial clashes between Israel and Iran on June 13 had set the stage for a wider war. Now, the United States was no longer a spectator. President Trump's message was carefully worded to project strength and finality. He stated that no further strikes were planned, but he added a critical condition. This peace would only hold if Iran did not retaliate. The message was both a military announcement and a diplomatic ultimatum, delivered in the unfiltered style the world had come to expect from his administration. It left no room for ambiguity about America's new position in the escalating crisis. As the news ricocheted across global networks, details began to emerge, painting a picture of a meticulously planned and executed operation. The strikes had occurred in the dead of night in Iran, around 2:30 a.m. local time. This timing was clearly chosen to maximize the element of surprise and minimize the potential for an immediate Iranian military response. The world was now grappling with the reality of what this meant. The United States had crossed a line, moving from diplomatic pressure and sanctions to direct military force against a sovereign nation. Every government, from London to Beijing, scrambled to understand the full scope of the attack and its inevitable consequences. President Trump was scheduled to address the nation later that evening from the White House. He called the moment historic and framed his decision as a necessary step to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran. His brief social media post had already done its job, setting the tone for the formal address to come. It was a message of power and resolve, aimed as much at allies and adversaries as it was at the American public. The president had made his move, a high-stakes gamble that had irrevocably altered the geopolitical landscape. The question on everyone's mind was simple and terrifying: what happens next? The American strikes did not happen in a vacuum. They were the culmination of weeks of rapidly escalating tensions that began with an Israeli attack on Iranian assets on June 13. This initial act of aggression triggered a swift response from Tehran, which launched its own missile barrages against Israel. The region was suddenly plunged into a direct, open conflict between two of its most powerful adversaries. For a brief moment, there was a glimmer of hope for de-escalation. Iran, while responding militarily, also signaled a willingness to return to the negotiating table to discuss its nuclear program, the very issue at the heart of the decades-long standoff. Hope for a peaceful resolution was quickly extinguished. Diplomatic talks convened in Geneva, but they were doomed from the start. The Trump administration's position was uncompromising. U.S. negotiators demanded nothing less than Iran's unconditional surrender on the nuclear issue. This included a complete and verifiable halt to all uranium enrichment activities. For the Iranian regime, this was an impossible demand, seen as an affront to their national sovereignty. The talks collapsed, leaving the diplomatic path to peace completely blocked. The failure of these negotiations removed the final off-ramp before a major military confrontation, making a clash seem all but inevitable. President Trump had publicly set a 2-week deadline for Iran to make a decision, a countdown that put the entire world on high alert. However, behind the scenes, the timeline was far more accelerated. The president acted within just 2 days of the failed Geneva talks, demonstrating that the decision to strike had likely already been made. This rapid move suggested that the diplomatic efforts may have been more of a formality than a genuine attempt at finding common ground. The administration was operating in full coordination with Israel, its closest ally in the region, which had been advocating for a more aggressive stance against Iran for years. The context also included a series of covert operations. In the days leading up to the U.S. attack, Israel claimed to have assassinated 3 senior Iranian commanders. These men were allegedly responsible for coordinating with proxy militias like Hamas and Hezbollah. These targeted killings further inflamed the situation, pushing the Iranian leadership into a corner. With diplomacy dead, its military leadership under attack, and its primary adversary Israel engaged in open warfare, the stage was set for a dramatic intervention. The American airstrikes were the final decisive act in a prelude that had been written in fire and failed words. The attack itself was a stunning display of American air power and technological superiority. The mission was carried out by a squadron of B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, which took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. These uniquely designed aircraft are virtually invisible to radar, allowing them to penetrate deep into heavily defended enemy airspace without detection. Their long-range capabilities meant they could fly from the American heartland, strike their targets in Iran, and return without needing to land at a forward base in the volatile region. This capability was crucial for maintaining the element of surprise and protecting U.S. assets from an immediate counterattack. The bombers delivered a payload of devastating GBU-57AB massive ordnance penetrators, more commonly known as bunker busters. These enormous 30,000-pound bombs are specifically designed to destroy deeply buried and hardened targets. 3 key sites in Iran's nuclear program were hit. The first was Fordo, a uranium enrichment facility built deep inside a mountain near the holy city of Qom. Its underground location, some 80 to 90 meters deep, was meant to protect it from military strikes. The bunker busters, however, were engineered for precisely this kind of challenge. U.S. officials later stated that the Fordo facility had been taken off the table. The second target was Natanz, Iran's largest and best-known uranium enrichment facility. This sprawling complex was the centerpiece of Iran's nuclear ambitions, capable of housing tens of thousands of centrifuges. It was here that Iran had been enriching uranium to 60% purity, a level dangerously close to the 90% needed for a nuclear weapon. The third site struck was in Isfahan, home to Iran's largest nuclear research complex. This facility employed thousands of scientists and was believed to be a key location for weapons-related research and development. The coordinated destruction of these 3 sites effectively decapitated the known components of Iran's nuclear program. Iran's immediate response was a mix of defiance and damage control. State television confirmed that explosions had occurred at all 3 locations, but claimed the sites had been evacuated in advance. They insisted that casualties and damage were minimal, a narrative aimed at preserving morale and projecting an image of resilience. But the message broadcast to the world was far more menacing. "Mr. Trump, you started it and we will end it," a state TV anchor declared, a direct and personal threat to the American president. Iran's foreign minister followed up, asserting the nation's right to retaliate and vowing that no negotiations would take place while the country was under attack. The strikes immediately fractured the political landscape back home in the United States. President Trump had briefed top Republicans and key defense hawks like Senator Lindsey Graham in advance of the operation. They swiftly came out in support, praising the president's action as a bold and decisive move to neutralize a grave threat to national and global security. They argued that years of diplomacy had failed, and that military force was the only option left to prevent a nuclear Iran. Breaking with his party, Senator John Fetterman also expressed support for the strikes, highlighting the deep and often unpredictable divisions the issue had created within American politics. However, the reaction from the other side of the aisle was one of shock and condemnation. Key Democratic leaders were reportedly left completely in the dark, learning of the attack from news reports just like the general public. They criticized the president for launching an act of war without congressional approval, calling it a reckless and unconstitutional abuse of power. They warned that the strikes would likely provoke a massive Iranian retaliation, potentially dragging the United States into a prolonged and bloody regional conflict. The lack of unity in Washington mirrored the uncertainty felt across the country, as Americans grappled with the reality of being on the brink of another war. The immediate future is now shrouded in immense uncertainty. While the strikes may have set back Iran's nuclear program by several years, they have also opened the door to a wide range of retaliatory actions. Experts warn that Iran could unleash its proxy forces across the Middle East, targeting the approximately 40,000 U.S. troops stationed in the region. American bases, naval ships, and even global oil shipping routes could become targets. The threat of a direct missile attack from Iran against U.S. allies like Israel or Saudi Arabia also looms large, a scenario that would trigger an all-out regional war with catastrophic consequences. For the people living in the region, the situation is terrifying. Already thousands of civilians have been injured or killed in the preceding conflict between Israel and Iran. Now, with the United States directly involved, the fear of what comes next is palpable. Nations have begun evacuating their citizens, and internet access in Iran has been severely restricted, cutting people off from the outside world. The president's call for Iran to end this war rings hollow in a region now bracing for its violent expansion. The world watches and waits, hoping for peace but preparing for a conflict that no one can control.